If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to dogmanencounters.com/podcast. Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for another special live stream episode of the show. I really appreciate you joining us. Before we bring on tonight's guest, I just want to thank you once again so much for all the support you offered Jo. She's doing so well now. She's in the same house that she has been in, but she's getting all the pieces in place so that she can make that move into the new house, the safer house. And last time I checked, the total number of donations were up to like $9,000. I just don't know what to say. I can't thank you enough for all the support you've given her. Like I said last week on the show, even those of you who didn't donate, there are a lot of you who did support her with your words and everything, and I just can't thank you enough either. I really do appreciate it. I really do. Well, without any further ado, let's bring on tonight's guest. Tonight's guest is Carissa. Carissa, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. We really appreciate your time. Carissa, please give us a brief bio on yourself.
I am 33 years old. I work at an auto parts store. I'm very artistic and very open and very creative. Grew up in a really small town and yeah, I don't know what else to say other than that.
You know, it's funny, after doing who knows how many shows, it seems like the bio is always the hardest part for a guest to nail, because talking about other things is pretty easy in most cases, but talking about yourself is just about as hard as it gets. So I know it's not easy. It's not. Carissa, when you were 15, that's when you had this encounter that we're going to talk about tonight. Do you think having it at such a young age shaped the person you grew up to be today?
Well, living in a small town, I experienced a lot of interesting things that I think not most people would have experienced at that age. And this story is just like a prime example of that.
Yeah, I'd say it is. You mentioned that it was a small town, but it was actually a small town called Gold River on Vancouver Island. What can you tell us about the place?
It's smaller than I think most people realize. It is an hour away from anything else. It's tons of forest, lots of deep, thick forest, like the tiniest little town you've ever seen. They didn't have cell phone service when I lived there. They only got it like a year or two ago. Very remote. Like most people that grow up on Vancouver Island and think they know the island, I say, hey, I'm from Gold River. And most of the time they're like, where's that? So it's really not a well-known place, but absolutely beautiful place to grow up in. I had the best times, the best experiences. I wouldn't have wanted to be raised anywhere else. It was a wonderful place to live.
I'll bet it is. It was. Yeah, for the longest time, I would have done anything to live on Vancouver Island, because it seems like such a great place. I mean, you talk about beauty. The place is beautiful, but I'm sure a lot of people listening to the show tonight don't know a thing about Vancouver Island. What can you tell us about it?
It's the most beautiful place in the world. If you love hiking, if you love lakes, it's really like got it all. You can go surfing, you can go on the lakes, on the rivers, camping. There's smaller cities there. If you've never been to Vancouver Island, you should definitely try to make a trip out there, because everybody in BC and Canada want to live on Vancouver Island. It is the best part of Canada by far. It is legendary. Everybody loves it. I'm really proud and happy to be from a place that's so beautiful and wonderful.
Well, I can understand why you would be. And you know, too, Carissa, when people hear island, she lived on Vancouver Island, they think, okay, well, it's a small place. A lot of people, they don't get the idea behind how big Vancouver Island actually is. Please tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Vancouver Island is bigger than Japan. Like it is, like I say, an island, but it's a massive island. Like it would probably take a day and a half to drive from the bottom to the top.
Yeah, it is awfully big. It
Mhm.
is. And for people listening, there's some kind of an artifact that I hear. Every once in a while, I hear a click. I'm not sure what's going on with StreamYard, but everything's clean on my end. Whatever is clicking or popping must be through StreamYard. So I apologize for that. It's not going to be in the podcast version of the show. The podcast versions of these live streams are always cleaned up and don't have these problems. But yeah, for the YouTube side, unfortunately, I can't take that away. So again, I apologize. But having said that, Carissa, what was the most frightening animal experience you had on Vancouver Island that didn't involve that dog man?
Cougars for sure. I was gonna mention a story in my little or like a little side story about a cougar interaction that I dumbly did. But cougars, like in Gold River, is actually the highest density of cougars in the whole world, I believe. Like they're everywhere. They're always lurking around. I was just there a couple weeks ago, and everyone's dash cams, or not dash cams, but like front door cams, there's always cougars roaming around. Like they're everywhere. They've attacked people, they eat people's animals all the time. So I've seen lots of black bears, but as long as you're bear aware, they're not a threat. They're usually just eating berries. I've come across so many black bears and I'm not usually that afraid of them, but cougars I'm definitely afraid of because they will attack you. So that's definitely the biggest threat there.
Wow, yeah, that would definitely complicate going for walks in the woods if you had a population of cougars that thick, that dense. That would definitely do it. From what I understand, Carissa, you forgot about your encounter for a period of time. How long did you go without thinking about it?
Um, like it was just like 3 years ago that it kind of popped up into my memory thanks to reading a story on Reddit that was similar to mine. So for probably like, I don't know, like 12 years or something, I guess, maybe longer than that. I guess I didn't remember, or like just kind of in the past. So I was glad that I had come across that story on Reddit because it brought me here now, and it's like opened up this curiosity. And I never really knew what it was that I saw. Like I actually didn't know what Dogman was until very recently because I always just referred to it as this beast because I could not make sense of whatever I had seen because it was nothing that I had known of prior to this.
Did being able to finally put a name on what you saw running out of the woods towards you make it easier to deal with, or did it not make a difference?
Yeah, well, it's got me like a lot more curious of like what it was and the fact that other people in the area have seen it too. So, um, yeah, I don't think I think I would be terrified if it happened again for sure. But now it's just like opened up this big curiosity for me.
You said it opened up a form of curiosity for you, but I'm wondering, does that mean that you think maybe sometime down the road you might actually go out looking for these guys, or
You know,
no,
when people
thank you?
ask me that, like the some people that I told a story to, they're like, "Let's go look for it," and I'm like, "No," because like even if I did go look for it, what if I see a cougar? Like I'm actually more, it's more likely that I'm going to see a cougar, and that's kind of just as scary. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would.
Well, that's good. I always tell people be careful what you wish for because, yeah, sometimes if you go out there trying to research them, they'll follow you home and try to research you. So please keep that in mind.
Yes, for sure.
Not a good thing. All right, Carissa, please tell us about your encounter now. Give us every last detail that comes to mind.
Okay. First of all, thank you everybody for listening to my story. So like I just said, I grew up in Vancouver Island. It's in the province of British Columbia on the west coast. Very, very small, remote town. It's an hour away from any other civilization. It takes like 10 minutes to walk across the town. Uh, like where my mom lives, there's like, it's on the edge of town. So there's no, behind her house, it's like forest and beyond. Like there's nothing, no houses, no cities, no towns beyond that. Um, yeah, so living in Gold River, you'd obviously come across lots of bears and cougars. One time I was very drunk and young, and I saw a cougar run past me, but I actually thought it was a golden retriever. And I went running after it, and I said, "Come here, puppy." And my friends were like, "Carissa, that's a cougar." And then when my drunk vision focused on it, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that is a cougar." So I've seen lots of cougars up close. Actually, when we moved into my house in Gold River, there was a cougar den in our backyard, and there was a dead cougar in it, like something had killed it, which I never really thought about recently, what kind of predator would be killing a cougar. So that was kind of crazy experience. So I've seen lots of bears, I've seen lots of cougars. The wolves are a little bit more shy, so they don't really come into town as much. And there's lots of elks. I've seen lots of elk, and there's deer, there's bobcats, but they don't come around very often either. So I've like seen a lot of animals, been around them a lot, but whatever I saw this night was definitely nothing that I had ever seen or knew prior to this or existed. So I was about 15 or 16. I was walking home alone, which was an often occurrence there. My mom trusted me to walk across town. I was at my friend's house. Must have been a Friday or Saturday night. I had a strict curfew for 10 p.m. So it was probably about that time. It was either fall or winter. It wasn't snowy, but it was cold and dark. And when you're in like such a small town like that, because they don't have light pollution, it's really dark. Like, it's different than being in the city. It's really dark. Like, there's the dimly lit streetlights, but even in between every streetlight, it's really dark. Like, it's just it's very quiet. Like, you could hear a pin drop. If there's a bird in the bush, you're going to hear it. It's completely silent at night. There is nothing going on in that town. You could hear somebody talk from way down the road because it is so quiet there. So I'm walking home. I'm almost at the end of my walk. I'm walking up this one last steep hill. When I get to the top of the hill, I turn right, go 3 houses down, and my mom's house is just at the end of it. So in between all these houses, there's all this forest in between the properties. So when I walk up the hill, right in front of me is a chunk of thick forest. So I'm walking up the hill, I'm looking down at my feet, and this noise catches my attention because in a town so silent like this, when you hear something, it's gonna alarm you. So what it caught my attention was hearing this growling, snarling noise. And I instantly stopped dead in my tracks. I'm like, what is that? I'm like almost afraid to look up because this noise is so unfamiliar. Like, I've heard cougars like scream in the middle of the night, bobcats make weird noises. So to hear this really unfamiliar noise was just petrifying. So I'm looking at my feet, I hear this snarling noise, and I look up, and coming out of this chunk of forest is this, what I have described for years as a big black beast. And when it first came out of the forest, it was on its hind legs. And the weird thing too is, like, you would think a beast of this size, I would have heard it rustling through the bushes, because like I would hear like a snake in the grass or a bird in the bush, but I didn't hear anything. The only thing that I heard was this snarling noise, and that's what caught my attention. So I look up and I see this huge black beast, and it's on its hind legs when it's first coming out of the forest. So the first thing I notice, it's on its hind legs. It's massive. It's huge. It's towering over me. It's about like at least like 8 feet tall. It had like really big, broad shoulders, very like thick, black, matted hair, had like pointed back ears, and it's on its hind legs, and it's coming out of the forest, and it's coming straight towards me. And I just stopped. Like, I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. Like, my heart didn't even have time to race. I didn't have time to think. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I could not believe what I was seeing. So it comes out of the forest, and then when it comes onto the cement, it goes on all fours. And that's when I kind of noticed its really elongated arms. And even when it's on all fours, it's still massive. Like, it's just absolutely huge. Like, I could not believe how big this thing is. That's why I know it was not a bear, and I know it was not a cougar, because of its huge size. Like, I cannot believe it. It had really snarling teeth, and I was just like petrified. So it comes out of the forest, it's on its hind legs, goes on all fours, and it starts kind of like trotting towards me. And I'm still just like pinned to my spot, stopped moving, stopped walking, and it's coming straight towards me. And then maybe about 5 feet in front of me, it quickly just darted to the left and went down this trail down to Nimkish Park. And this trail is kind of in between a couple of houses, and then it's about like a minute or so walk down to the park. So this whole interaction happened so quickly. It just ran towards me, got a few feet in front of me, and just darted to the left. I was just standing there, like, I just didn't even know what to think. So I just booked it home and went to bed and questioned forever what I had just seen. So the next day, I'm talking to some of my friends, and they talk about how they saw a beast thing that night too. And I think they chalked it up to like it being their imagination, or that like they didn't actually see it or something. But it was the same night that I saw that thing, and they were at Nimkish Park when they saw this thing. And I was like white in the face when they told me they saw this beast, because I'm like, I saw this too. But I think they just thought it was funny and didn't really believe what they had saw. But I was just like, wow, I was not the only person to see this. This is crazy. So I forgot about this story for years. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago, I was on Reddit. And I think it was like the paranormal thread. And somebody had posted this story about driving down the highway, and then they saw this beast thing, just described it the same way as I had. And then it darted in front of their car, and it was on their hind legs and let out like this big, loud, demonic scream. So I had to message them and be like, I'm sorry, like, where did this happen? They said it happened outside of Courtney, which geographically shares the same forest as Gold River. It's like a 3-hour drive, but the forest is like, they share the same forest. So it wouldn't be too outrageous for this thing to have gone into this area. So I'm like, wow, that's so crazy. So I was telling somebody recently about that experience, and they encouraged me, like, do you know what this thing was? And I was like, I have no idea. So they encouraged me to write about my story on Reddit. So recently I had done that, and somebody tagged another story that also happened on Vancouver Island, and about like kind of the same area. Their story was like pretty scary. They were like 4x4ing, and they had come up this trail and saw this thing dart across their car. And same thing, it was huge, black, like everything I had described it to be. And then they turned the corner, and this thing is like on its hind legs holding on to a tree. And yeah, the story was like really crazy, and it was just so interesting to hear a story like that in the same area. So this like sparks my curiosity. I start listening to podcasts and watching videos on YouTube and stuff. So I come across this YouTube video, and it's named like Native American Werewolf Legends, Western and Northern Canada. So I open this video, and the first thing that they mentioned was about these legends that date back to the indigenous people of the area. They mentioned a specific location called Yuquat Cove. I'm sorry if I pronounced that not right. Yuquat is located on Nootka Island, which is on the far, far west side of Vancouver Island. It's a boat ride from Gold River. It's often nicknamed Friendly Cove, which is named the Spanish settlers nicknamed for them for their people being so friendly and nice. This cove is like an ancient piece of land and history of British Columbia. This is the first ever recorded of Europeans landing and meeting the Indigenous people of British Columbia. Fun fact, I actually went to Friendly Cove when I was in scouting as a kid. I think I was in grade 6. And I was actually the person that got to unveil a plaque for it being like a historian site. And I was personally chosen to unveil the plaque. So it was a really special moment that I was extremely honored to be chosen to do that. So this band that's from Nootka Island is called the Nuchalnith Mowichin Mushlet. I'm pretty sure I said that right, but I extremely apologize if I butchered it. So this band specifically has recordings from anthropologists and legends that they're young men practicing strange winter rituals where certain young men were supposedly temporarily possessed by spirits of coastal wolves. The first ever reporting of it was back in 1803 by a 20-year-old English blacksmith who spent 3 years as a slave to the Chief McQuina, who is the chief of the Nootka land. There's lots of fascinating stories about this guy, actually, but this story really hit home for me because Gold River is the closest civilization to Friendly Cove. The Indigenous people of Gold River are that exact band that they mentioned in this video. So it just really blew my mind that all my friends that I grew up with and their ancestors have most likely, they referred to it as a wolf man, but they most likely have been seeing this creature for like over 4,000 years. So it was just really interesting that this video specifically mentions this band because this band does not exist anywhere else in the world except Gold River and the Nootka Island area. So specifically in Gold River. Yeah, so at the time of my encounter, I was like pretty petrified, but now I'm curious as ever. And I feel pretty lucky to have this opportunity to experience something like this, as it's like somewhat rare. And I'm happy to be getting answers after all these years. I feel comfortable knowing that I'm not alone and that I'm not a crazy conspiracy theorist. I feel validated and have now come to find a group of people that I share a connection with. And yeah, it's become a more of a positive experience for me, which I'm thankful for because I know not everybody feels positive about it. And I'm just looking forward to seeing where this journey takes me and learning more about it. So yeah, that's pretty much my story.
Yeah, journey is right. It can be a pretty long, twisting journey too, depending on how the encounter played out. I'm just glad, like I told you, that it didn't traumatize you the way so many encounters traumatize eyewitnesses. Thank goodness for that.
Yeah, and I think like the fact that I didn't know what it was until now, when it's been like 18-ish years or something. So not knowing what it was or not being able to explain it. And like back then, I don't think Reddit existed or anything. And the internet wasn't quite at your fingertips like it is now. So yeah, I just never really got to look into it or thought about trying to figure out what it was. So I'm happy to be here, like finding out answers and knowing that there's a whole group of people that have been experiencing the same thing that I have.
Well, like I told you, more people than you're ever going to know have probably had encounters with these guys and just not told you about it. So, yeah, that's how it normally goes.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if sharing my story to the people of Gold River, if anybody else has seen something that I have and maybe like me didn't know what it was, and maybe this will open up like a whole story for them too.
It just might. You never know. I told you about how Joe told me about the guy, and I actually saw his comment last week. Was it Monday or Friday night when we did episode 524? I think it was. But anyway, I saw a guy leave a comment, and apparently he lives like 2 blocks away from where Joe's going to move. So it's a small world. It's a small world.
There is.
You said that you were walking home the night that this encounter happened. How close were you to home, though, in feet? You said you were at the bottom of the hill. You had to walk up the hill. But in feet, if you had to guesstimate, how far do you think you were from your front door?
I would say like 200 meters, maybe, if that makes sense.
Oh, that's right. You're Canadian, so
Yeah, sorry.
meters. I'm sorry. So about 600 feet, which must have felt like 6 miles to you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'll bet. How close was your nearest neighbor's home to you then when you saw that dog man come busting out of the trees?
Right beside me. Like I was on the right side of the road and there was a house right beside me.
Did you know those people?
Yeah.
Did the thought ever cross your mind to run to their front door, or did you figure, okay, it's nighttime, I'm gonna just head for home and hope for the best?
Yeah, it was just like fight or flight. I was running. I'm a runner.
Yeah, well, you can run, but not good enough to save yourself from one of these things if it has the mindset to come after you. And that brings up another question. You obviously didn't run from it, but did that thought ever cross your mind?
It happened so fast that like I said, like I couldn't even think, move, like my heart couldn't even race. I couldn't even breathe or think fast enough. It happened so quickly. Like I had no idea what to do in that second. Like it was only like a couple of seconds. Like it was so quick, it's hard to like not deny it because it was so close to me. Like it happened so quickly, but it came really close to me.
Yeah, you said about 5 feet away.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's way too close for comfort.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I'd say. When it came out of the trees and was heading right toward you, was it showing any emotion?
You know what? So what I remember, it comes out, it's on its hind legs, and it's like has a snarl like I don't even know how to describe it other than that. But it kind of like looked left and right. And I don't know how to describe this, but it kind of like had this like I don't know, like a look or like kind of like an attitude or a look about it, like ugh, like get out of my way, like it didn't want to see me. And I think that's why it darted so quickly down into the forest and the trail.
Yeah, that just might be why it did that, but it's really hard to say. You can't even think for people, so there's no way to think for these things.
Yeah, but I think if it wanted something to do with me or if it wanted to eat me or attack me, it would have. It came close enough. And like, yeah, it seemed like it wasn't going to go down that trail. Like it seemed like it was a last minute decision. Like it got so close to me and just darted to the left.
Yeah, it's hard to say. More than likely, it just saw an opportunity to get a rise out of you when it came out of the tree, so it came over to you 5 feet away. Then I'm sure it could see from the look on your face it was mission accomplished, so it turned and moved on. Which makes me wonder, when it turned, did you ever see a tail on it?
No, because it was so dark and it happened so quickly that, and it was just really dark. So the blackness of it just like kind of like um camouflaged into the forest and the dark. So because like there are street lights there, but even in between every street light, it's really dark in between. So like it was bright enough that I could see it, but yeah, it's dark fur really camouflaged into like the dark, creepy night that was occurring already.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet it was dark as pitch.
Yeah.
It came to within 5 feet of you. Did you smell anything?
Actually, yeah, that is something I forgot to mention. It smelled, I didn't notice it at the second, but when I started walking again, because I had walked through the area that it ran, it did like, it smelled like, I don't like garbage. Like it smelled disgusting. It smelled gross. It was like, yeah, like it was, for lack of a better term, like a homeless person that hadn't bathed in years or something. Like it was a gross smell that I can't even put my finger on. Like I don't think I had ever smelled anything like that in my life.
Oh, I bet you hadn't and haven't. When your friends told you about seeing a dog man too, did they describe the one they saw for you? In other words, how sure are you or aren't you that the one that they saw was the same one that you saw?
Well, it was just like interesting that they were hanging out at Nimkish Field, which was about a minute walk from where it ran down, and it ran down that trail. And if it kept going down that trail, it would have went through Nimkish Park, and that's where they were all hanging out that night. And they were just kind of like, hey, yeah, remember when we saw that big black beast? And I'm like, what do you mean? Because I had that encounter too, and I had asked, like, where were you guys? And they're like, oh, we were at Nimkish, and we saw this big black beast run through the trail, and it was like really hairy and it was massive, and like exactly what I would have described it to be. I think that they didn't really believe what they had saw, but I know what I saw. So I actually want to ask my friend about it. I might send him this podcast and ask if he remembers seeing it. I'm not sure if he remembers because it was so long ago, but I remember.
I wouldn't be surprised if he does remember it still, because that's a pretty profound experience.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah, it really is. Well, the questions are flooding in. They are pouring in. So I'm looking for the first one to ask. I'm going to throw Spartan's question at you. His question or her question is, do you think it was a bluff charge or did it just get distracted?
It's hard to say. I'm thinking like maybe distracted, but I don't know. It was just weird how it was like it was coming straight at me, and it seemed like it made just a last minute decision to dart in the trail. Like, I don't know if it was coming straight at me for a reason or something, but maybe it could have been. I really don't know. Sorry, I don't know how to answer that.
Oh, that's all right. We'll forgive you. The next one's from Just a Dakota, and their question is, how tall was it on, I think they're asking, how tall was it on all fours?
I'm a bad judge of height, but I'm 5'6", and it was still quite a bit taller than me, like at least like 2 or 3 feet taller than me, I would say. And like the size of its body was just like so wide, like 3 or 4 or 5 times wider than me. Like it was, yeah, and its shoulders were just so broad and big. But even when it was massive on when it was on its hind legs, but even when it was on all fours, it was still way taller than me.
Wow, yeah, that's pretty big. I'm not sure if you knew it, but on 2 legs, it can be 12 feet tall when they're fully mature. Did you know that?
No. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge. That's massive. It was massive. Like when I saw it on hind legs, I was just blown away with its size, and then when it was on all fours, it was still really big.
Well, yeah. Yeah, even on all fours, a Dogman that height on 2 legs is still going to be big, as you saw with your own 2 eyes. So that's
Yeah,
how it is.
like looking up when it was on its four or on all fours.
Wow. Yeah, that is a big one then. I've got another one for you from Dash Down. They want to know, do you feel you're still able to communicate with the entity in any way? Have you tried?
So I don't live in Gold River anymore, but my mom still does in the same house. And I was just there a couple weeks ago. So I walk past that spot every single time that I'm there. And I do think about it every time I see that little piece of forest that it ran out of. I think this is all coming back to me just recently, like since I was in Gold River last time. So I haven't tried to communicate with any entity. I'm more worried about cougars when I'm there because the probability of seeing a cougar is a lot higher than probably seeing this thing. I don't know if I would want to communicate with it. I think, like, when I think about it, it sounds interesting and intriguing, but it was terrifying. I know that I'm like smiling and like saying it was a positive experience, but it was very terrifying. Like that was probably the scariest moment of my life. So I don't know how I would try to communicate with it. If anybody has ideas, you can throw them at me. So I wonder if the next time I go back to Gold River, if I would be interested in doing that. But it's also really scary. I don't think I'd want to do it alone. Maybe if I had somebody with me.
Well, as far as communicating with you, some eyewitnesses report what's called mind speak, where they receive this telepathic form of communication, they say. And I think that's basically what they were wondering about, if you'd been telepathically communicated by what would appear to be that same dogman or not. But in most cases, with eyewitnesses, that just doesn't happen. I've got another question for you from Blood Viper, and their question is, did you notice the eye color and smell from the dogman?
Again, it was so dark. I don't really remember its eyes, to be honest. Like, I used to think that it was like some kind of color. Like, I used to think it was red or like yellow or something, but I actually like don't remember that well. And especially because it happened so quickly that it's like hard to take in every single detail other than the ones that were extremely obvious, like its color, its size, the teeth, the snarling, the noise. Like, that was all very apparent, but I honestly can't really remember its eyes that well, and I wish that I could. And that's another reason why I wish kind of that I could see it again so I could have a more confirmed answer. But to be honest, I can't really remember the color of its eyes.
Can you make that snarling sound that you said it made for us one more time? I'm just messing with you.
I was like, oh no. I wish I could like imitate it the way that I heard it, because the snarling, growling noise, that was probably the most terrifying part of it. Like, even when it was close to me, that was really scary. But to hear that noise and like not know what it is, especially when it's usually so silent there, that was terrifying. I've heard all kinds of weird animals make noises, but that was like nothing I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, I'm sure. Hope you never hear it again and never have another experience like that again. We've got a question for you from Mike 777 that you already answered. He wanted to know, did the dogman have an expression on its face when it saw you? Well,
Yeah.
I guess that is different from the question I asked, because he wants to know about when it first saw you. Did it have an expression on its face? So, yeah, if you can answer that for us.
So when I first saw it, I didn't really notice an expression. It wasn't until it was on all fours. And when it was just starting, like, I guess right before it turned to the left, that's when it kind of looked left and right and kind of made this face that was like, ugh, like, I don't know, like, I don't know if it was like, ugh, a human, or like, it looked like unimpressed, um, like, I don't know if it like didn't want to see me, or if it was like mad to see me, or if I was in its way, or I interrupted whatever he was doing. Yeah, it definitely had an unimpressed look on his face, and he just kind of looked left and right and like kind of like made like a breathing like after the initial snarling growl noise.
You poor thing. I can only imagine what you must have had going through your mind when all this was playing out. And the fact that you disassociated yourself from that experience for as long as you did, that tells me right there that it did affect you stronger than more than likely you realize. So maybe
Yeah,
that did help you. I don't know.
and it's been like many years, but um even with it being so many years, I can still remember that moment like it wasn't that long ago. Like, this was like around 18 years ago. Like, that's quite a big length of time, but I can still picture that thing in my mind, and I think I will till the day I die, because it was something so unreal.
Well, I'm sure you will. Yeah, how could you forget about something like that? Well, I take that back. You did forget about it for a period of time, but yeah, I think that was much more so of a coping mechanism than anything else.
Yeah,
But
I guess like the fact that I didn't know where it was, or what it was, sorry, that like, how do you explain something if you don't even know what it was? So I think maybe that was like contributing to why I didn't think about it too much.
yeah, that could possibly explain it. I'm just glad you didn't know what dogmen were back then, because after talking with you and everything, I think more than likely that would have made it more difficult for you to deal with that experience if you had heard about dogmen, you knew what dogmen were back then. So thank
Honest,
goodness you didn't know.
yeah, honestly, yeah. If I had still been living in Gold River and knew what that was, I would probably be way more scared to walk around. And maybe now that I know what it is, when I go back there, maybe I'll be more conscious about it. I think I will be now, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a given. Yeah, that's automatic there. I've got another one for you, Carissa, from Ace. Ace wants to know, well, this is actually a general question. Ace wants to know, aren't there also a lot of Bigfoot that live in Vancouver Island? And yeah,
There is a lot of reportings, especially in the Gold River area, again, because it's such thick forest. There is like this Gold River group on Facebook. Actually, just a couple weeks ago, somebody thinks that they saw Bigfoot. I watched the video. I couldn't really see anything. I do have a friend who has been a family friend of mine my whole life, and we were both in scouting together. And we used to go on hikes where we go on up into the mountains, very, very, very remote, way more remote than Gold River is. Like, there's absolutely nothing out there. We go on these hikes and we go up the mountain for like a few days. And there's this lake at the top of one of the mountains, somewhere in between Campbell River and Gold River. I'm not actually sure the mountain what it is, but there is a lake up there. And my friend swears up and down there's nobody around, like, except them in this forest. And he saw a Bigfoot jump out of the lake and run into the forest. And he's like, nobody has to believe me. He's like, but I know that I saw this. So yeah, there is a lot of sightings in Gold River, or a lot of experiences over years and years of Bigfoot. And in Vancouver Island as a whole, there's a lot of people saying that there's definitely something out there. So I haven't seen anything, but I believe people that say that they have seen it. So I think that's pretty interesting.
well, it's no surprise. I mean, you talk about a perfect habitat for them. It's no wonder.
Yeah,
No wonder.
nobody would see them, right? It's a perfect place for them to hide.
Oh, definitely. Great place for them to run around and play and do whatever they want to do. So, no surprise there. Just Dakota wants to know, how tall was it when it was standing up? You already addressed that. You said it was 8.5-ish, maybe 9 feet tall.
Yeah, it could have even been taller than that. Like, I am a bad judge of height. So it could have even been more than 10 feet. It was absolutely massive, though. So tall.
Yeah, must have been. Must have been awfully big. The next one is from Marta Magdalena. And her question is, did you get good vibes or bad vibes from them?
Bad vibe for sure. Especially it's the demeanor on its face that just gave me a bad vibe. And I don't know, it just gave me this really dark, eerie feeling, especially to not know what it is. And it seemed like, I don't know, like something out of this world. It seemed demonic, like it seemed dark. It seemed just terrifying. I did not have good vibes from it at all. But I mean, it didn't eat me, so like maybe it wasn't as bad as I assumed, but definitely bad vibes, yes.
Yeah, well, as you know, it could have definitely done that. So,
Yeah, it had a chance to. Like, if it wanted to, it would have, or it could have.
that's right. It definitely would have, could have, and would have. This next one up is from Denise C. And she wants to know, tell us about its front and back legs.
Yeah, so like I said, the top of it had very wide, muscular shoulders. And then the bottom half of it was a lot thinner. Like, it had the big, broad shoulders, and then it simmered down towards the bottom of it. Its legs and torso and everything was a lot smaller than like the chest and the shoulders. And then when it was on all fours, I realized how elongated its arms were. I didn't realize how elongated its arms were, and like how big it was still on all fours. So, and it like, I don't know if it had paws, or like, I thought I remembered seeing claws, but again, like, it happened so quickly. And it was interesting the way that it ran towards me, because it was kind of trotting like a horse or something. It wasn't like how I would picture like a wolf to run or something, or a dog or a cougar. It was like kind of trotting like both of its front arms ahead and then like trotting back and forth, not it was like in sync with each other, not like one right paw in front of the left and back and forth. It was like trotting, like, and it was kind of like bouncing up and down as it trotted towards me, and then took a sharp turn to the left and was gone so quick. And it was so quiet. That was the other thing that was so weird, is how quiet it was, because normally a thing of this size, you would hear it rustling through the deep, thick forest. Like, and it didn't make a sound coming out. It didn't make a sound leaving. The only thing that I heard that caught my attention was it snarling and growling at me.
That doesn't surprise me. These guys can be ridiculously quiet when they want to be. That reminds me of an eyewitness I spoke with. For some reason, it sticks out in my mind, even though it's a conversation I had with an eyewitness probably about 5 years ago. He was homeless at the time, if I remember right, and he and his wife were camping in this tent. They were living in this tent at this campground that didn't get very much traffic. It was pretty late in the year. I think it was like November, maybe early December. There were a lot of leaves blowing around, and it was a windy night, maybe borderline almost stormy night. And they had just settled down and were trying to fall asleep, I think, when all of a sudden his wife heard something that sounded off. So she brought it to his attention, and he just brushed it off and told her to go to sleep, if I remember right. Well, she kept hearing this strange sound. So she finally went and poked her head out of the tent and didn't see anything. But then I think when she looked over the top of the tent and back the opposite direction, that's when she saw, I think, 2 or 3 dogmen spread out. And then she noticed there were other dogmen that basically almost had that tent surrounded. The only opening was between that tent and their car. So she screamed, and somehow she communicated to him that they needed to get out of there right now. So they bolted for the car, left everything in the tent, understandably so. They bolted for the car and got out of there. Well, I had a good long conversation with him, trying to explain to him, look, if your wife heard them, especially on a night like that, when you have a lot of ambient noise with leaves blowing around, the trees moving, the wind blowing, if you heard them that night, then they wanted you to hear them. But I just couldn't get that through to him. He was convinced that they saved themselves. His wife hearing them out there outside of the tent is what saved them, because they were trying to ambush them in their tent. So you win some, you lose some, but yeah, try as I might, like I said, I just couldn't get through to this guy that, no, these guys can be dead silent if they want to be. There's no way that you're ever going to hear them coming, especially, like I said, on a night like that, with a bunch of wind, the trees whipping around, the leaves blowing around or whatnot. If they don't want you to hear them, especially on a night like that, you are not. I don't know, maybe he's still having trouble with that encounter to this day, but you know what they say, you can't put tea into a cup that's already full, unfortunately.
That's terrifying that their travel impacts. I'm like shaking hearing that story. That sounds so scary.
Yeah, they do sometimes, Carissa, but understand, when you look at their daily caloric requirement, an obligate carnivore, I mean, if they hung out in numbers with any kind of regularity, they would deplete the resources in the area they were occupying in no time. So it's in their best interest to only hang out alone. In most cases, that is. I'm sure they do come together because, yeah, credible eyewitnesses have reported seeing them together in numbers. But when you look at the mechanics of it, their daily caloric requirements, there's just no way that it would make sense for numbers of them to stay together for any period of time, because like I said, they would just blow through all the resources in any given area that they occupied. So just like grizzly bears, they live alone, and other large predators like that, they live alone. Lions, they live in numbers and prides the way they do because the animals there in Africa are so plentiful. The prey are so ridiculously plentiful that they can get away with doing that. But over here, you just don't have the resources like that. So that's why I've got that opinion on that. But anyway, let's move on to the next question. It is from a very experienced Dogman researcher named Al Santoriga. Hey, Al. That question, yeah, it's one that's already been answered, but he asked this question, I think, way back before I even asked you it. He wants to know, did it have a tail? And from what you said, you didn't notice if it had a tail or not.
Yeah, honestly, it was just like it happened so fast and it was so dark that when it would have went to the trail, which would have been the only opportunity I would have noticed a tail, it was so dark and it's dark fur, just like camouflaged and with the pitch blackness that I can't remember seeing a tail, to be honest. I wish I could remember better, and I wish that the encounter was longer so I could have really taken in as many details as I can. But yeah, that's one I honestly can't question or can't answer that question because I don't know. I don't remember seeing a tail, but it very well could have, and it could have just been too dark to see the details of it.
I'm glad your encounter wasn't any longer. Be careful what you wish for because, yeah, that could be a bad thing.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough.
Yeah, it can be. I've got another one for you from Audacious Amber, and this is up to you if you want to answer this or not. It's totally up to you, just like all of these questions. But she wants to know, are you religious? Do you believe in God? And if so, do you think any of that played a role in it not hurting you? Again, totally up to you if you want to answer that or not. There's no pressure.
I don't know what I believe in, to be honest. I don't know if there is a God or if there's not. I think that we all need to believe in a higher power of some sort. I think if I related to any religion, it would maybe be Buddhism because I believe in reincarnation and stuff like that. But I'm not super religious. I've gone to church like a handful of times in my life. But yeah, I'm not sure if that would play a role in why it came to me or didn't attack me or something. I don't know if it, I guess I was just lucky. I don't know.
Well, I don't know that you're a lucky. I mean, that is an MO for these guys to try and frighten you to within an inch of your life. And once they can see that's been accomplished, move on. So, and like we talked about in that first conversation, that's how they normally operate. I'm never going to say that there aren't dangerous ones out there that will rip you apart if they have the opportunity, but yeah, that's clearly not what you encountered that night, because if it was that way, then unfortunately you wouldn't be here. And that's all there is to that. All right, Carissa, I've got another one for you from Daniel Ponce. And Daniel wants to know, did you notice the eye color or any eye shine? You answered that before. And did the creature have a tail? You answered that as well. So we'll move on to the next one, which is from Michigan Meat Eater.
For a second, I saw this side note there saying Dogman has a tail and werewolf does not. That's interesting. Maybe it didn't have a tail if I didn't notice it. And that's what the indigenous people of the area say that it was a wolf man. That's what they refer to it as. So maybe it didn't have a tail if I didn't see it. Maybe. I'm not 100% sure though.
That whole thing about dogmen have tails and werewolves don't have tails, don't put much credence at all into that, because that was put out there by a guy who claimed to be a government operative who just happened to come on a podcast and try to spill the beans about everything they supposedly knew, or a lot of the things that they knew about quote unquote dogmen versus werewolves. They could tell you how many hairs were on a werewolf's right shoulder blade per square inch versus a dogman's. Yeah, I mean, just every indication of being a charlatan. A person who's a government operative is not going to come on a podcast like that and spill the beans. It would be all too easy for the government to easily identify who that person was, whether they say their name or not, identify who it was that spilled the beans, and then address that person in a way that would not be to their liking. Anyone who is an actual government operative is going to realize that. And the last thing they're going to want to do is come on a program and spill those beans and put their life in jeopardy. So, yeah, whenever I see that nonsense about, well, dogmen have tails and werewolves don't, it just goes in one ear and right out the other.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Yeah, there's too much bad info. I've said it before, I'll say it again. There is way too much bad info about dogmen floating around out there. Way too much.
Yeah.
All right. I've got another question for you from Al Santoriga. He wants to know, were its ears on the side or on the top of his head?
I think we missed the last question. It was about something to do with Gold River, if I still lived there or something. Or,
Oh, yeah. I
yeah.
apologize. Yeah, Michigan Meat Eater wanted to know, do you still live in Gold River? Have you heard of any other encounters or had any other weird things happen to you? I apologize.
It's all good. I just I noticed it, so I wanted to answer it. I don't live in Gold River still. I have moved away to the city for like the last almost 15 years, but my mom still lives there. Like I was just there a couple weeks ago. Um, when I was younger, I lived in Gold River. I found it like a very interesting place to live. Like I've told a lot of friends weird stories that have happened when I lived in Gold River, and they're like, "Wow, you have the craziest stories." Um, I I used to play with Ouija boards and stuff when I was a kid. I know that's pretty controversial, but
Oh, no.
I had some paranormal experiences besides that when I lived to Gold River. And I think Gold River is there's just a lot of history and there's lots of spirituality there. So I think this beast thing was the weirdest thing I had. But I also had some pretty scary stories with Ouija boards, actually. I could share one if you guys are interested.
I've got to sleep tonight, Carissa.
Okay, no,
No, I will hear about that later on, though. I've got to hear about that now. I've got a paranormal themed show. Maybe you can come on My Paranormal Experience and share those experiences and any other creepy experiences
I
you
have
had.
quite a few paranormal experiences actually, so we could talk about that another time.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to that. All right, now Al Santoriga wants to know, were its ears on the side or on the top of his head?
I believe they were like kind of on the top, like pointed up. It had a really big head too, like it blended into its shoulders, but I believe its ears were not so much on the side, but maybe on the top.
Yeah, for a canine type dog, man, that's par for the course. That's what I would expect. So that
Yeah.
does fit. This next one up is from Glim Kamada, and Glenn wants to know, did it have hind legs like a dog or a human?
Again, it happened so quickly that it's hard to decipher the difference. I don't remember thinking it was human, but again, it was like so dark and black, and its fur kind of um, camouflaged into like the darkness of it. But yeah, the fact that it was on its hind legs was very alarming to me. But when once it got down on like all fours, I would say it was more like a dog or a wolf or something. But its front arms were not like a dog or a wolf. Like they were very long, elongated. Um, yeah, that was what was like a definite factor that it wasn't a wolf or a cougar because they don't have arms like that.
No, they don't. Well, I've got some great questions tonight. We've got another good one from Spartan. Spartan wants to know, could you hear the claws while he was running toward you?
It's not like I could hear a scratching or like I could just hear like maybe its pads like kind of when it was trotting. It's not like I could hear scratching or clicking or something like that, but I could hear its feet trotting on the ground. So, and like again, it happened so quick, but I'm pretty sure it had some kind of claw.
Oh, I'm sure it did too. Yeah, all dogmen have claws on their feet, just like on their fingertips. This next one up is from Al Santoriga also. He wants to know, did it have a mane?
Yeah, like it's all of its fur on its head and its neck and its shoulders. Like the fur was very thick, like very thick, matted, long, not like super long, but it was pretty long and very thick. And it had like a really big head, really big shoulders, lots of thick hair. Like I could see the thickness of its fur really well.
Would you say its head was disproportionately large for its body, or did it
Yeah,
fit size-wise?
yeah, and it's funny because like now that I look at Dogman pictures, I think its head looked a lot bigger than the most of the Dogman photos that I've seen. It had a really big head.
Yeah, a lot of them do. They
Yeah.
do. This next one up is from Daniel Ponce, and Daniel wants to know, did the creature have a long snout like a wolf or a German shepherd or just a short muzzle?
I think it was longer because its head was so big. And yeah, it had like its mouth was open and it's had really snarling teeth, so I could like see that really well. But yeah, I wouldn't say it was a short muzzle, definitely because of the size of its head. It was kind of thick and longer.
That answers that. I've got another one for you from fellow patriot. He wants to know, where did this happen? What state?
I do not live in the United States. I live in Canada. Sorry if I didn't mention Canada. I thought that I did, but maybe I missed that. So I live in British Columbia. And it's on Vancouver Island in British Columbia on the very west coast. Gold River is located, they call it North Island, but it's basically right smack down in the middle of Vancouver Island. But it's more on the west coast because there is an inlet that comes in from the ocean. So that is where it's located, British Columbia, Canada, Vancouver Island, Gold River.
That answers that. I've got another one for you from NKD 2883, Carissa. He wants to know, or she wants to know, did you ever lock eyes with it, even if for a fraction of a second?
When it was trotting towards me and before it had moved its head left to right and then kind of gave me this weird, disgusted look. Yeah, it was looking at me right in the eye.
I'm sure it was, unfortunately. The next one up is from Mike 777. Yeah, and Mike wants to know, if you did not hear footfalls before you saw it, which you said you did hear some, did you see any blurry air, as if portals, as if it, I think what he meant to say was, as if it could be a portal? Thanks.
That's an interesting question. Again, because it's so dark, I definitely didn't notice anything like that, but it still boggles my mind that I could not hear it coming out prior. Maybe that's possible. I don't really know the history of it, but it definitely was just a weird experience because I couldn't hear it coming out of the forest, and like I definitely would have. So yeah, that's still very curious to me how like I would hear a bird or a snake in that bush if there was one. So the fact that something of that size could have been coming out of the bush and then going into the other bush and I didn't hear it, it's pretty weird.
Weird and unfair. Well, at least it seems unfair, doesn't it, that something that big can be so silent?
Yeah, like it doesn't even make sense. I don't even understand that.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. This next one up is from Xtaz, and Xtaz wants to know, does she ever get a feeling it's near?
Like since then?
Yeah, I think that's what they wanted to know.
No, I'm like not. I haven't. But again, like when I'm in the area, like I haven't thought about it too much. But it'll be interesting if I get that feeling ever again when I'm there, because maybe the same fear would come back to me if it was in the area. I'm not sure how that would work, but it could be possible. I haven't so far. That's the only experience and the only fear that I've felt from an encounter like that. But maybe, yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting if it does happen though, but it hasn't so far.
Well, you never know. Like I told you in that first conversation, if you've had an encounter with the Dogman in the past, that does predispose you to be in a position where you're more likely to have another encounter with one than a person who's never had an encounter to start with, it would appear. Now, I'm not going to say that you're doomed to have another encounter if you've already had one encounter with the Dogman, because, yeah, that's not the case. There are plenty of eyewitnesses who apparently never do have a follow-up, a second encounter. But it does seem like if you have one encounter, that does kind of open the door for others to possibly happen. It makes you a little more likely than most people to have them. So just something to keep in mind. This next one up is from Andres Carrizales. And Andres wants to know, when the Dogman was walking on 2 feet, did it look natural or unnatural?
I would say unnatural for the fact that it was so large, and to me, whatever this thing could have been at the time, which I was unknown of what it was, it just didn't seem like, what the heck is this big on its hind legs? Like, it did not seem natural to me at all.
Yeah, I'm sure you were short circuiting trying to process everything. So you were doing good to know your own name when all this was going on.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I'd say you were. This next one up is from D Truth. Hey D. D wants to know, did she mention the gender of the dog man?
Yeah, I would have no idea. I just keep saying he. I don't know why. Maybe that's not the right way to describe it, but yeah, I honestly have no idea if it's a he or a she or them or a they.
Like I told you before, you did really well soaking up all the details from this thing that you did. I mean, I'm sure you're doing good to know your own name. You're standing there, you're walking home. It's like any other time you've walked home, no reason to think for a second that anything out of the ordinary is going to happen. And the next thing you know, you're being charged by a dog man. So for you to notice all those details that you did, you really do deserve a lot of credit, because most people would have just locked up and they wouldn't have noticed anything. They just would have been doing good to maintain consciousness.
Yeah, for how quick the encounter occurred, I'm surprised I could even gather that many details about it. And even after it being so many years, I do still remember it pretty well, but there's some details I wish I could remember better. But again, like, it happened so quickly and it was dark when it happened too. So it's hard to pick up as many details, but it's also something that I can never forget. And it's something that I've never seen or never heard of or never knew existed prior. So there's certain details about it that will always stand out because of how different and rare it was, and just nothing that I've ever seen before. So it's, in that sense, it's easy to remember some details just because they're so obscure.
Well, I'm sure all those details that you did notice, that you did see, they're going to be burned into your mind. And yeah, like you said, you're never going to forget them. I don't know how you could.
No,
So
never.
yeah, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. But did you ever have any problems with nightmares?
No, I can't remember ever dreaming about it, to be honest. And I have some pretty crazy dreams, so I don't remember dreaming about it. But I wonder if I will now that it's been coming in my thoughts a lot more lately. Sometimes my waking life will influence some crazy dreams, so maybe they're coming.
They might. If you do start to have dreams, I just hope they're good ones and not bad ones, because, if they're bad, then that opens up a whole nother can of worms, unfortunately, that I hope you don't have to deal with. But yeah, if you ever do have a problem with that, please do let me know. There's a lady I know who apparently has a good way to handle that.
Okay, cool. Good to know.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, please keep that in mind. I've got another one for you from Blood Viper, and he wants to know, did your encounter happen in a year ending in either a 7, 4, or 1?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I wonder what the significance of that is. But I think it was 2006. Maybe, like like I said, I think I was around 15 or 16. It was a long time ago, so it's a little bit hard to remember. But I think it was like 2006, maybe 2005, somewhere around there.
All right, that answers that. And yeah, that is obviously a loaded question. I'm not sure why he wanted to know that, unless there's some significance in years that end in those digits. I'm sure there is some kind of a significance, but yeah, he never did say what he was wanting to know that for, but that's okay. I've got another question for you from Dash Down. And that question is, when you look back at it, did it change you in any way? Might it have been sent to send you a message?
Um, I think, like, even with all the paranormal stuff I've experienced, I think all those experiences kind of change your thoughts on the world and life. It's not like it impacted me heavily, but I mean, it's been 18 years and it's still something that is fresh in my mind now. So I'm not like terribly upset about it or like not being able to handle it well or anything. But I think things happen for a reason, and maybe I don't know the reason yet or now, and maybe one day I will. But yeah, possibly it could have been there for a reason, or maybe it wanted me to see it. Yeah, I don't really know exactly, but it's interesting to think about.
Yes, it is, and I'm pretty sure it did want you to see it. I mean, it seems like when these encounters happen, these guys will go miles out of the way to force an encounter to happen, just for apparently nothing more than to get a response out of the eyewitness, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm sure that he wanted you to see him, and see him you did. So it got what it wanted. I'm going to ask one more question from you, Carissa, and that is from Michigan Meat Eater. And he wants to know, did you notice anything odd about the tips of its ears?
Not really. Like I'm also like, I do remember it having pointy ears, but other than that, I can't really remember too much about it. Like I think they were just furry. I don't think like anything was different that I could pick up or notice about it. And like I don't remember if it was missing a chunk out of its ear or something like that. Like I don't remember anything odd about it. I just remember seeing that it had pointed up ears. And that's about all I can remember about that.
Did you see enough detail in its ears? Probably not, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Did you see enough detail in its ears, Carissa, to be able to compare its ears to any particular breed of dog?
Well, I had a German Shepherd Akita, and Akitas typically have pretty pointed ears. So it kind of reminded me of that because like an Akita's ears are very pointed up, and yeah, like not, I wouldn't say it's exactly like that, but yeah, they're definitely like very pointy and hairy and black and dark and about like the same size of like for the size of its head, its ears kind of like made sense to be the size that they were. But
Well,
yeah, that's all I can really remember about its ears.
that's a good way to describe them. So I'd say that's a good answer. Well, we're about out of time, Carissa, but before we go, do you have any closing comments you'd like to put out there for us?
I'd just like to say thank you to everybody listening to my story, and I would love to hear more stories of other people's experience, especially on Canada and Vancouver Island, or anybody's in general. But what I'm really curious about is if I'm going to hear more stories about the area that it happened to me, or in Vancouver Island in general, just because I think that's so interesting. And I would like to connect with people if they have stories like I do, because it really blew me away to find out other people in the area had seen the same thing that I had. And I'm just like in this rabbit hole, and I'm so curious, and I want to know everything, and I want to hear all the stories, and I'm excited to hear more about it.
It's a twisting and deep rabbit hole. That's a given. So yeah, be careful what you wish for. And like I said, you just might hear from people who've had encounters with them there on the island. I wouldn't be surprised in the least if you do.
I hope I do. I'd be really excited about that.
Yeah, well, I think it just might be a matter of time. You never know. Time will tell. But having said that, thanks so much for coming on and sharing the details of your experience with us, number one, Carissa, and also answering all these questions from the listeners. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys. And those were great questions. I wasn't sure if I would have many questions, but they were good because it got me thinking more in detail about my encounter. So those were all really good questions. Thank you, guys.
Like I said, they were really good questions. So give them credit. All right. Well, having said that, yeah, thanks again so much for your time, Carissa, and have a great night.
Thank you. You guys have a great night too.
You're welcome. We'll see ya.
Goodbye.
Bye. Well, before we get out of here, like I said at the start of the show, thanks so much for supporting these eyewitnesses the way you do. It helps so much more than you're ever going to know. I can't thank you enough for that. But if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, all you have to do is go to dogmanencounters.com, submit a report, and if you do that, then I'll be more than happy to contact you and schedule a phone conversation with you so we can find out how the encounter played out. And if you need help, I can give it to you. But having said that, thanks again so much for listening, everyone. Have a great weekend and an even better night.